We believe that the evidence described by my colleagues today and assembled throughout our hearings warrants a criminal referral of former President Donald J. Trump, John Eastman, and others for violations of this statute. There is more than sufficient evidence to refer former President Donald J. Trump, John Eastman, and others for violating Title 18, Section 371. This statute makes it a crime to conspire to defraud the United States. In other words, to make an agreement to impair, obstruct, or defeat the lawful functions of the United States government by deceitful or dishonest means. Former President Trump did not engage in a plan to defraud the United States acting alone. He entered into agreements, formal and informal, with several other individuals who assisted him with his criminal objectives. Our report describes in detail the actions of numerous co-conspirators who agreed with and participated in Trump's plan to impair, obstruct, and defeat the certification of President Biden's electoral victory.
Stand up.
From a defabricated garden shed in Rockland County, New York, USA, this is Stand Up with Pete Dominic. On today's episode, how to feel your best while visiting family and donning that awkward-looking gas mask. And now, the podcast host who has no need for gas masks because his breath is as clean and pure as Hansen, Pete Dominic!
Well, of course, that is correct. My breath is always clean as Hansen. Pico, everybody. He's up in Oregon for the week, visiting the in-laws on Christmas vacation. Happy Hanukkah. Sorry I didn't wish those of you that are celebrating the Festival of Lights happy Chanukah yesterday. I still say Chanukah. I don't care that it's not correct. That's what I thought it was, how I thought it was pronounced when I was younger. Anyway, happy Hanukkah and Merry Christmas week before Christmas. Thank you very much for joining me here on this daily podcast. It is daily. I am here every day, usually with two very smart people that I've dragged along to join me in conversation. Today, I've got Professor of Journalism Jeff Jarvis joins me to talk about all the fallout over Twitter and how to get on Mastodon. And we always love talking to Professor of Journalism Jeff Jarvis. And then before that, I've got probably the most respected bioethicist in the country, and it's been far too long since I've talked to him. It's the great Dr. Arthur Caplan of NYU joins me to talk about all things COVID. We talk about women's reproductive rights a little bit and more. Two great guests joining me on today's podcast episode of Stand Up. Jeff Jarvis, Dr. Arthur Caplan. But as you heard there at the top, as you probably paid attention, at least some attention to yesterday, you know, I watched almost 2 hours of the hearing, but not live, because I'm not going to be strapped down like that because I had to get Christmas shopping done. I went to the mall during the day. I came home. I watched the hearings. I then went out with Ava, and we shot film for 2 hours. Well, video. She's working on her film submission to get into film school. That's right. Against my better recommendations right now, she is applying to several film schools. I say, listen, be a filmmaker, follow your dreams. But I don't know that you need to go to college for film. It's like going to college for acting. No, just act. Just make the films. But that's a disagreement we continue to have, and I'm going to support her no matter what she does. And I love being out there shooting with her, even though it was like 25 degrees. But hey, that's how I can support her. I hold the camera, she tells me where to go and what to do, and she makes the film. And the other one, whose name we don't mention, now, Julia, she yesterday did the morning announcements for the first time. She is the vice president of her freshman class, and she read the morning announcements over the loudspeaker, which was my old job, for real. That was one of the first things I ever did near a microphone, and we used to get in a lot of trouble because we would say things that weren't happening after school. Julia has yet to pull that prank. I'm certainly hoping that she does. But I was really proud of her that she did the morning announcements, just like her old man. That was so cool. Unfortunately for her, when she read the Pledge of Allegiance, she said invisible instead of indivisible, which I kind of liked as a quiet protest for having to say the Pledge of Allegiance, which I was never really any big fan of, but I thought that was hilarious. And she didn't, apparently, but better than apparently the girl who cried when she messed up. She said so he's someone worse. To create perspective, she said somebody else messed up when they were doing the announcements and they audibly cried. Can you imagine? Poor high school kid reading the announcements, just start bawling for all of your classmates to hear. All right. Well, listen, it was a good Monday. I hope you had a good Monday. Welcome to your Tuesday. Thank you very much for pressing play on this podcast. If you haven't given this show a review, everybody says you got to give a review. You do. You got to get those. We got to get those reviews up. If you haven't written what you like about the show on Apple or Spotify, please do subscribe on YouTube, Stand Up with Pete, posting videos there. And of course, I can't do it without your paid subscription. And I'm always got anxiety that I'm going to lose everybody overnight. So if you like the podcast, if you listen to it often, you haven't subscribed yet, hey, that'd be awesome if you would. Go to standupwithpete.com right now. So many amazing folks out there listening. I hear from you each and every day, and we have built just such a wonderful community of people, and I always look forward to seeing you on Thursday night, going on a little over 3 years now. Well, almost 3 years that we've been doing it because we started in March 2020. And I look forward to seeing you this Thursday night. Maybe I'll invite a special holiday guest. How about that? Any suggestions? Send them my way. standupwithpete@gmail.com. All right, let me just read a few news stories, couple clips I want to play for you, and we'll get right to my conversation with Dr. Caplan. But I'm able to do this. I'm able to aggregate these clips and pull the audio for you and put it all together in good context. And so I usually do this for the first 10 or 15 minutes of each day's show and then get to my guests. You can always fast forward through it if you already know about this stuff or you don't want my spin or take on it, which is always limited. But yesterday, of course, the big story was the January 6th committee with their final public hearing, and they formally accused former President Trump of inciting an insurrection, conspiracy to defraud the U.S., and obstructing Congress's January 6th joint session. And they unanimously voted to refer the crimes to the Justice Department for prosecution. Now, I don't know how much analysis you paid attention to on the evening shows yesterday. I'm sure they covered it quite a bit, but I'm just going to give you just this 2 minutes from Ari Melber, who was talking right after the hearings wrapped. And I saw his top line reaction, and I thought this is pretty good.
This is a huge deal. They just threw the book at Donald Trump. They just named him and his potential co-conspirators. Let's put it according to the committee, which made the news, and we can also discuss the defenses and replies afforded to Donald Trump and others. But according to the committee, Donald Trump is a felon, an insurrectionist, someone who wanted to riot but just physically couldn't get there. According to the committee, he has co-conspirators in Clark and Eastman, people inside the government who were planning the coup. According to the committee, Donald Trump's purpose and goal in advance was to overthrow the election through any means necessary, violent and otherwise. What's really key here about this satchel of charges that they recommend, and the DOJ will make up its own mind, is the committee is basically saying, we got you, we have the receipts, we have the video, this all was planned, and that you had a method to do this both violently and this is important, illegally but peacefully, what sometimes is colloquially known as a bloodless coup. So you take that all together, Katie and Andrea, and what you have here is the complete highest, most aggressive possible case, as we watch the sort of the folks in the room, including, I think we're looking at one of the officers talk to reporters and others gathered there. This is the highest possible, most aggressive case you could make. And in terms of the news, if you're watching at home going, okay, Ari, I've heard about Donald Trump getting in trouble before, and I've heard this committee throw allegations at him before, the difference now is this does formalize a method for the DOJ to process these referrals, to do its work that's already ongoing with the special counsel probe, and then ultimately to decide whether one or more of these is actionable, is indictable.
All right, well, there you go. We will be checking in with legal analysts to talk about that. Special counsel Jack Smith. That's his actual name, Jack Smith. and see what happens with these referrals to the Department of Justice. In other news, though, coming out of Congress yesterday, the House Ways and Means Committee is expected to vote today on whether to make 6 years of Trump's tax records public, which I think will be a really interesting story if that unfolds. Also, a federal appeals court rejected an effort by 19 Republican-led states to keep a Trump-era border policy in place. You probably heard about Title 42, the pandemic-era health policy that's been used to deter migrants more than 2.5 million times. So that was big news yesterday. Also, nobody's talking about this, but the Senate finally gave approval to an $858 billion defense spending bill, which is more than the next 10 countries combined apparently spend on defense. That is our military defense complex and insecurity complex that we have to be the police of the world and, of course, make millions and millions of dollars in weapons and weapon system sales to all of these giant companies that do, of course, employ hundreds of thousands of Americans. Anyway, I digress. The national average for gasoline dropped to $3.14 a gallon. Idiot who reads it that way. Oh, and how about this one? I was going back and forth with my boy Mark Nolte in Iowa last night about this story. The New York Times got a big scoop, investigative reporting on a guy named George Santos. He's a newly elected Republican from representing part of Long Island, Flushing, Queens, and he seems to have misrepresented himself throughout his entire life. Here is CBS News local New York affiliate. This is like a 3-minute report, but I think it's really interesting and important, so I just decided to include the whole thing.
A report from the New York Times suggests Congressman-elect George Santos may have lied about major events in his life. The Long Island Republicans' win in a blue district helped give the GOP control of the House.
Oh, yeah, such an important point. They won 4 seats, I think they turned in New York State, including in my district. And this guy, by lying the whole way. All right, sorry, back to him.
But CBS 2's Carolyn Gussoff shows us there are growing calls for him to resign even before he's sworn in.
Spoiler alert, he's not going to resign. There's no such thing as shame. Win however you can win if you're a Republican.
34-year-old George Santos turned a blue district red to represent Nassau's North Shore and parts of Queens by campaigning as a seasoned financier. But this New York Times investigative story calls into question key parts of the resume he sold to voters. Employers and alma mater Santos listed have no record of him, including Citigroup and Goldman Sachs, Baruch College, and NYU. Other parts of his resume may be largely fiction. A purported nonprofit animal rescue claims he lost employees at the Pulse nightclub shooting. The Times review of public documents and court filings found criminal charges for check fraud in Brazil, eviction cases against him, and raised campaign finance questions.
This is not about resume padding. This is allegations about the fact he lied on his house ethics forms, allegations about him lying about his personal finances, where his money came from for his campaign. And what's most troubling is George Santos' refusal to answer any questions about this at all.
During the campaign, Robert Zimmerman, his Democratic opponent, had called out inconsistencies. Santos's attorney calls the story a shotgun blast of attacks. It is no surprise that Congressman-elect Santos has enemies at the New York Times who are attempting to smear his good name with these defamatory allegations. The leader of the Nassau Republican Party said George Santos deserves an opportunity to address the claims detailed in the article. The Times couldn't even find evidence he lives at the address where he's registered to vote.
The totality of it is just so astounding that, I don't think that the Congress should seat him. Frankly, it's within their purview to decide to seat someone or not. This is not the person that voters chose to elect.
Some are calling on Santos to resign.
To lie about where he lives, where he went to college, to lie about his employees dying in a mass shooting. This is somebody disqualified to run for office.
Political observers point out little can be done unless any alleged mischaracterization amounts to a crime.
It's extremely rare throughout the history of this country that Congress has actually expelled one of their own. Unfortunately, lying on your resume is not a problem for running for office. Voters we'll just have to wait for the next election to be able to have their say.
Santos's attorney says he is discussing the congressman-elect's response. His former opponent says the response is already overdue. In Great Neck, Long Island, Carolyn Gussoff, CBS 2 News.
Now, the Times also found no evidence of the $80 million family investment firm Santos has said he manages.
Holy smokes. This guy is a real old school con artist. And apparently he was everywhere and involved with everything. And what a grifter. I'm going to follow closely what happens with that guy, but I don't see him going anywhere, right? Right? Because you used to have to resign no matter what your politics were, Republican, Democrat, conservative, liberal. But now it's he won. That's how he won. He's not going to quit. You don't even have to leave if you lose the election, if you're the president of the United States. All right, speaking of dirty, filthy Republicans, here is Lauren Boebert, rather, calling out Marjorie Taylor Greene at the Conservative Patriot Fest or whatever it's called, whatever they're doing. Charlie Kirk is interviewing him. You got Matt Gaetz and Lauren Boebert standing right there. And she calls out Marjorie Taylor Greene, and then all hell broke loose between the two of them on Twitter. It's getting really, really entertaining. Lauren Boebert blasting Marjorie Taylor Greene for supporting Kevin McCarthy.
Someone who we all respect, Marjorie Taylor Greene, says Kevin McCarthy is going to be a great speaker.
I guess you'll have to ask Marjorie about that. I'm a fan of hers. I'm an admirer, but it's not something we see the same way.
Lauren?
Well, you know, I've been aligned with Marjorie and accused of believing a lot of the things that she believes in. I don't believe in this, just like I don't believe in Russian space lasers.
Are you a hard no?
Space lasers and all of this? No, I'm just saying we need to actually have an inside conversation and make sure that these promises are there.
All right, so then Marjorie Taylor Greene went on Twitter and went off on Lauren Boebert. So the Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert feud that we have been wanting and predicting for a while is officially on. There you go. How about stop voting for stupid people? How about that? Okay, well, that's it for the news. Now it's time to get to my first guest. Coming up, though, a great conversation with Jeff Jarvis that begins at about 42 minutes. But first, he is a professor at the NYU Grossman School of Medicine. He's a professor of medical ethics. He has written many, many books. One of the most respected bioethicists in the country. He's been on all kinds of and continues to be on all kinds of committees. The regular commentator on medicine and science, and has been joining me fairly regularly for years now, so long that we've become pretty friendly, as I have with so many of my guests. I'm so happy to have him back on the show. He used to be on Twitter at Arthur Caplan. He no longer is, but you can learn more about him at aboutme/Arthur Caplan with a C for some reason. Ladies and gentlemen, we are off right now with Art Caplan.
Dr. Arthur Caplan, so great to see you. Thank you for joining me.
Hey, thank you for having me back.
Lots to talk with you about. I previewed some of the issues before I hit record for listeners, but I just have to start with something somewhat personal. You have left us on Twitter.
Yeah, partially. I haven't left us completely.
Well, that was what the long pause was for, on Twitter. Sir, I went over to the, I knew I was going to talk to you. I go over to the timeline to see what Caplan's up to. Love the Caplan. Love him on the Twitter. He's great on Twitter, totally unfiltered. And you left. When Trump was let back on, you said, I am out, and I screamed, no, not Caplan!
A loss to the world, yes. Well, look, the real reason I left is Musk. He tweeted something, prosecute Fauci. He's let back on every disinformer, kook, nutball on COVID. I see he just bounced off about 12 or 13 New York Times reporters because he doesn't like what they're doing. He keeps blocking people I know who are critical of him. And I think it's become a cesspool. And I know people love it, and it's a way to broadcast information out. I'm sure people are saying, Pete, what's on the next show? And put it on Twitter. But you can't really be in collusion with this guy. He's immoral. And until it either shapes up or somebody else gets an alternative, I just can't be there.
I think you'll be back. The worse it gets is when you'll step back in to the fray.
Yeah.
Say, I'm back. I'm here to straighten things out. Caplan has spoken. Yeah, I hear you. I don't know what. I'm addicted to it, I guess.
Yeah, a lot of people are. My friends are there saying, I know I just can't go without it. It's like,
well, I haven't found an alternative. I'm going to talk with Jeff Jarvis about this, but I have signed up for accounts on the other ones, and listen, I'm totally I've turned into my father. I signed up for these accounts 2 weeks ago. I can't get into them. Can't get in. So I can't even use them. I haven't even explored. But there are a lot of things, and that's why podcasts hopefully will always be something, because you have long form conversation about important issues. And that's what this whole show has always been about. And so we're so grateful that we get to talk to you. So let's get to some of those issues outside of, well, just it matters that on Twitter that he's banned all of the certain people, scientists and others, but more importantly, that he's let you touched on this, he's let all the kooks and cranks back on, and it makes it hard to know what's real anymore. Add that to DeSantis apparently running as an anti-vax. But first of all, how are we going to get our information? How do we know where to find best public health science information if the public health department is compromised?
Well, you're not going to find it on Twitter unless you really screen carefully and you've got a trusted source. There are still quite legitimate folks tweeting. There are people like Peter Hotez. There are people like the CDC director lady whose name I'm blocking. Other people I notice have gone quiet too. Paul Offit, one of my favorites, isn't there anymore. I see he's gone. So you gotta kind of follow the right folks if you're going to stay there looking for info.
Right. Rochelle Walensky, you mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And I think the other way to get, info, some of us are still lying around on places like LinkedIn. Well, turns out LinkedIn is a source that you can go to, and all the public health folks are there and they put up information. It's not Twitter. It's harder to broadcast to a group and stuff. But for finding info, yeah, you can go there.
I mean, you would think that people could turn to their state health departments for information, that they could turn to the government scientists for information. But increasingly, there has been doubt created about all of these institutions. Some of it's deserved, but the idea that we burn down an entire institution or person because they were off a little bit is we can't live that way, right?
Yeah. And look, what we're talking about here with federal sources for a second, we're not masking. We probably should be. Everything's back up. COVID's climbing. Flu's climbing. We're not getting the mask message. They clearly turned it political and just don't want to get into that again. It's pretty clear that the vaccine efforts are an utter failure. You know what the kid rate is for vaccination under 5? Somewhere between 0 and not a lot. I mean, it's like 2%, 3%.
For children under the age of 5?
Yeah. And boosters for you and me and older folks, maybe 10%, 15%. I mean, it's pathetic. We know that these things work.
Somebody told me that the bivalent wasn't as effective to the new strains that were out. I got mine. It put me out for a day. I was tie. I was sleepy. But anyway, what do you?
Well, look, they're effective in this way. They don't work as well to prevent you getting COVID. That's true. The original strains, the original vaccines way back in 2020, if you got it, there was a lower chance of you catching it. Now, the virus seems to be a little more nimble in terms of infecting you, me, everybody, but they still help in that you don't get as sick. And one nice thing is you don't get dead. So the death rate around vaccination with boosters is tiny. Also, one other thing, people, right-wing nuts, DeSantis's scientists, other people keep saying, well, it affects your heart. You could get a inflamed heart if you take these vaccines. And there is some truth in that. There's been a couple of people who did get that, but it went away in a couple of weeks. And the worst way to get an inflamed heart is to get COVID. And get bad COVID. So it's still better to take the shots. But I would say federal health policy with COVID at this point and flu, bad, poor, not what it should be.
We could talk about specifically more. One thing I'm noticing a trend of is when young, otherwise healthy people die suddenly, people are going quickly to wonder if they'd just been vaccinated. And that is a dangerous correlation for people to create. I remember asking Dr. Aaron Carroll about that. I was like, what do you, I was really kind of almost whispering to him, even though we were just on the phone off the record. I go, people are saying that young people or people are otherwise healthy people just dying as shortly after they got their vaccine. And he just said to me, he goes, people always just die. They just do. And, the Grant Wall, the writer, his heart aortic, he had some kind of an aneurysm in his.
Yes.
So,
and I mean, whatever vaccines do, they don't cause your main artery out of the heart, the aorta, to blow out. That is a congenital risk or something that's probably genetic. I think, Pete, his wife, Celine Gounder.
Yeah, she's a CBS doctor. She's an analyst. She's a physician who's also a CBS health correspondent. Sorry.
Yeah, and she had to jump up and say he did not die because he got vaccinated.
Right.
I mean, it was crazy.
Yeah, so I mean, we have to contend with that, and people just not understanding some of the simplest things about health and science.
I saw a guy who was killed, literally hit by a car, and he was on the list of COVID vaccine victims. I mean, come on.
Let's talk about Ron DeSantis, because he's the governor of Florida. And a lot of the political analysis I'm seeing in the progressive echo chamber is that he's now running in a lane to separate himself from Trump. He's painting Trump as pro-vaccine and he's running. But I want to, the politics aside from it and his future presidential hopes. I think it was Steve Bennett at Maddow blog that said if COVID could hire a lobbyist, it would hire Ron DeSantis. I mean, what is going on in Florida? The governor there, and he is going to maybe run for president, but he has a roundtable. He convenes a whole bunch of COVID vaccine skeptics and opponents. I contend if any governor stands with a bunch of people with white coats behind him, make them black people, white people, women, men. He had his own surgeon general. You can make people believe just about anything. Anyway, he is coming up with like this alternative to the CDC. What is happening and why does it matter?
Well, watching DeSantis not only go as a key part of his platform into anti-COVID propaganda, it does make you wonder, could they legalize assisted dying in Florida? Is that possible to escape this? I mean, the prospect of this guy running for president, at least Trump was colorful, shall we say? This guy brings all of Trump and dreary. What did Trump call him? De-sanctimonious? There's some truth in that.
His nicknames always have some truth, almost all the time. Every once in a while he misses.
But look, he has positioned himself as the pro-COVID virus candidate. He has basically said, we're not going to recommend masks. Do you remember that incident where kids lined up behind him and they were masked? He showed up at a press conference, high school kids, and bullied them.
Yes, he practically tore the mask off a kid. And the kid was like backing up. He's like, my mom told me to wear the mask, bro. I mean.
So, look, there have been more deaths in Florida among the elderly than in other states. His policy hasn't exactly been great. He keeps saying, I kept the state open, during COVID, but they still had horrible economic damage done. He basically has just decided, I'm throwing science out the window. I've appointed a complete anti-vaxxer as my state surgeon general, and I've gathered the craziest people I can find, and I'm going to put them on a committee. And by the way, he's also threatening to try and get a grand jury to
the state Supreme Court. He's asked them to convene a grand jury to conduct an investigation. And I think what'll happen, and I've seen this playbook happen from my town board run to national politics. They'll get documents from pharmaceutical companies and they'll pick words and sentences and just actual conversations and debates, and they'll cherry pick. They'll create a narrative. They'll broadcast that out, and there it is.
So let me make a mild suggestion. Courtroom isn't where science gets decided. Science gets decided in laboratories, and gets decided among scientists in peer-reviewed journals that you can go after and criticize and so on. But it's not the same as trying to figure out who's responsible if we have a fender bender. That's a different setting and a different setup. So the court idea is obnoxious. The panelists, look, one of the key panelists is this Swedish scientist, again, whose name I didn't forget and I repressed it in this case. And he was the guy who said, just let it roll, let COVID roll through and we'll all get natural immunity and things will be great. And they tried it in Sweden. And they've condemned it as a complete failure. The other place that's going to be trying this soon is China.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about what's going on there. Yeah.
Yeah, so they haven't vaccinated. They went with quarantine, right? They quarantine here, quarantine there, quarantining huge cities, no travel, shut down the economy, and people went out of their minds. Basically, how nuts does this quarantine strategy have to make you when you're willing to protest Xi and the Chinese party leadership? I mean, quite
why?
crazy.
I'm sorry, I'm confused. I was under the understanding that they did vaccinate, but they only used their vaccines that they made, which weren't as effective. But what is this? I'm sorry, I'm confused now. Were they not vaccinated?
They did use Chinese vaccines, which are poor, and they did not vaccinate thoroughly. So most of the elderly got no vaccines. They figured they would be quarantined anyway, weren't going anywhere. No need to vaccinate them. They don't go to work. They don't travel. They don't have spouses. It's all wrong. They're freaking out now completely, the Chinese, government, and they're going to have a lot of deaths. And it's the strategy that DeSantis wants you to follow. No vaccines and let it rip.
So you said in your email to me, China is about to show why COVID is real.
Yeah, I think they're going to get deaths. I think they're going to have a health system. Remember the early days of COVID here when we didn't have protective gear, we didn't have enough ventilators and beds. That's them. They don't have enough set up to take care of people. And basically, the government is going to say, well, this quarantine thing doesn't work. We can't sell our products. Our young people can't get jobs. So let's kill off the elderly.
Good God, that's a grim outlook and analysis.
Yeah, that's me. But I think that's the future there. I think basically you got this, it's too late to do a mass vaccine campaign among their older citizens. They're opening up. There's not much doubt that, you can test this prediction, anti-COVID folks. There's going to be a lot of deaths in China. Let's see.
Wow. Well, I hope you're wrong about that, but I don't know why it would be, because it's a virus and it's deadly.
Yeah.
Just real quick, we're talking about legal issues. Can there be prosecutions? Can you prosecute, misinformers in any case? Does that ever happen?
What you're trying to do is you try to pull licenses, and people have lost their license for being misinformers. That's run by the state medical board, but it's really tough to get them because they're, always sensitive to free speech and opinions. There are a number of people who have said they want to overturn, including DeSantis, by the way, they want to overturn any ability of the medical boards to pull your license if you give disinformation. They just say, look, it's all opinion. And that's the problem with this anti-COVID stuff. It is an opinion. I've got an opinion. You've got an opinion. But then there's truth. And when you get around to truth, how that gets settled is you do your studies, you publish your articles, you show what the mainstream opinion is. And if you don't follow that, then I think you're being an immoral, unethical doctor should use their license. So that's where the action is. But already the anti-COVID crowd is trying to defend every kook and nut under free speech. We're not talking about free speech. We're talking about what's the consensus scientific opinion, not the same thing.
Right. And then there's always the bioethicist that's going to be in the room and has something to say about that as well, which is why I love talking with you. And did you think, I don't know what you thought about the future of abortion legally, but did you ever think that you'd be writing about and talking about this kind of anti-abortion, half of the states, about 12 states having no access to abortion? Did you think that you'd have to be talking about that?
Yes.
You did.
As soon as Trump started making those court appointments, you knew they were stacking up. And I think I have to say, Alito has turned out to be worse than I thought he was going to be. Not only did he flip prior precedent, which has been in place, he said, well, it's not really settled. It's not really agreed upon. He was talking about the 16th century, I believe, when they didn't have abortion, but okay. But it was settled for, at least 50 years, which is pretty good settled opinion. Yeah. What I think people don't understand is this. They tend to say, well, in those states, it's going to be very hard for women who seek abortion to get an abortion, and that's true. But, this ripples throughout medicine, this abortion restriction or ban. For example, there are a lot of women who take experimental drugs for breast cancer, other cancers. One of the dangers is they can harm a fetus. One of the answers was if you had a baby that was a birth defect was caused, you would end the pregnancy. A lot of drug companies, a lot of women are going to say, I can't be in these studies. I can't guarantee that I'm not going to get pregnant. And I can't take that risk. And the drug company's going to take it from liability because they don't trust the women not to get pregnant. And there are things like in vitro fertilization, making babies in test tubes. They make more embryos all the time than they use to increase the likelihood of having a child. What are you going to do with the embryos that aren't used? Are you going to go to jail if you try to destroy them? Are you supposed to freeze them in some gigantic freezing chamber so that the utility company decides their fate? Meaning as long as the electricity goes, they're frozen, and then if there's a blackout, they're dead. It comes up in a whole slew of different ways where your healthcare is in trouble, even if you're a man, your healthcare is infringed upon when, as the failed candidate Dr. Oz said, I want the woman and her doctor and local politicians in there making decisions.
Have you seen anything since these laws have been passed that has in any way surprised you? Or I guess the better question would be how impactful have these laws been on women trying to access healthcare in those states that you've heard? Yeah, well, there's been some tremendous work done by many women's groups, pro-women advocacy groups to get abortion services closer to where bans are. What I'm saying is they move the abortion clinic into southern Illinois so it's closer to a state like Arkansas that has a ban. Still not easy for some women to get there for a variety of reasons, to do the trip and so on. There has been absolute restriction. I've seen two cases that are unbelievable. One, a woman had an ectopic pregnancy, and the hospital said, well, we're not sure we can abort it. An ectopic pregnancy is when the baby is forming outside the womb in the fallopian tube. It's not viable, and it could kill her. You're going to wait for what? But they did. And there have been other situations where people have seen dangers to the woman, and they're basically saying, we have to wait until your life really is in jeopardy before we can do an abortion. But to me, you've got to follow professional ethics here. So what I'd say is you have to act in the best interest of your patient. And what I'm looking for down the road, Pete, is basically some civil disobedience and some labor activity, meaning if I save a woman's life by doing an abortion, it's clear that that's what had to happen. Yeah. And they prosecute, then I think we should be looking at walkouts, slowdowns, healthcare impact for every legislator in particular who allowed this to happen in their state. I know it's horrible to say you're going to put other people's lives at risk, so I'd never restrict emergency care, but elective care, things that aren't an immediate emergency. I'm looking for healthcare to sort of get organized, get ready to protest, and by the way, the labor movement to back them up. Yeah. Well, they would definitely they would definitely need that, because as righteous as you want to be, you still got to pay your bills. Finally, before I let you go, you sent me this. I had not heard this. New Zealand has banned cigarette smoking, tobacco purchases for anybody born after 2008. And I predicted after seeing that headline that you are going to have a whole bunch of tobacco-stained older Kiwis trying to overthrow this young government and prime minister. What do you think of this? They'll fail because they're all wheezing and sick. I know, right? I know. They can't overtake the healthy
Next Generation. They basically finally said enough with this smoking thing. It's clearly poisonous. It's clearly dangerous. Kills too many people. Healthcare costs are too huge associated with smoking. If you're saying, well, what about alcohol? What about marijuana? They're not nearly as bad as smoking. Smoking is the king of misery when it comes to bad habits. And so they just said, unlike here where we're saying, well, let's restrict menthol or let's get rid of flavored vaping. We're doing the baby steps. They just finally said, we've had it and we're banning it. Do I think we could get that here? No. Why? Because the tobacco companies are a huge, huge lobby here. They're not in New Zealand.
Campaign finance is always there. It always is going to affect the outcome of not always, but it's
a big force.
Yeah, it's always a big force. Okay. Well, listen, I love talking to you. I appreciate you joining me today as always. And we got to do this again
soon.
Let's
not really prosecute Fauci. That's really a bad idea. He's a nice man. I know him. He doesn't deserve to go to jail for trying to save lives.
My prediction, there's no way that the House Oversight Committee does not subpoena him. They will demand he come up and testify, and he will want to and probably, I think, be forced to. I don't know. Now, I guess you don't have to. But he'll want to, just like Hillary Clinton did. Remember when she sat there for 11 hours? So Fauci's going to want to go up and take all their questions and let them look like idiots and point,
Well, short of the World Wrestling Federation, a standoff between Marjorie Taylor Greene and Anthony Fauci on science, I would watch. That would be entertainment.
I will host a watch party on Zoom, and I hope you'll be our special guest. We'll put you on the big screen.
On Twitter.
Oh, right. Yeah, of course. Thank you very much, sir.
All right.
And there he goes, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Art Caplan. Always great to have him joining the conversation. I always learn so much from him. And I'm sorry he's not on Twitter anymore. I think Twitter's going to make a strong comeback, everybody. I don't know what my next guest thinks, though. Dr. Caplan is off, but Jeff Jarvis is still on. Professor Jeff Jarvis to you. He, of course, is the author of several books. He's got a new book coming out. He's the Leonard Toe Professor of Journalism Innovation and Director of the Toe Knight Center for Entrepreneurial Journalism at the City University of New York's Craig Newmark Graduate School of Journalism. He's advised media companies, startups, foundations. He's a public speaker, of course. Was the founding editor of Entertainment Weekly magazine, the Sunday editor, associate publisher of the New York Daily News, TV critic for TV Guide and People, columnist of the San Francisco Examiner. He has done just about everything in media and journalism that you could do. BuzzMachine.com for more. Follow him on Post and on Twitter and Facebook and Mastodon, most importantly, which is what we talk about. Ladies and gentlemen, let's do it with Jeff Jarvis. Okay, there he is, Jeff Jarvis. Hi, Jeff. Thank you so much for joining me.
Hello, Peter.
So great to see you. You are the man I wanted to talk to, well, really for the past couple of weeks, and I'm glad that you could do this with me because this is it. I was like, now I have to talk to Jeff Jarvis after this week, but I am so sorry that I texted you, that I emailed you my phone number, which I thought you already had. I gave you my phone number with too many digits, didn't I?
8 digits, because you're that important.
That must have been maddening. I
almost texted back the variations on the phone number, thinking how many people would I irritate with that.
Sorry.
Then I know that I was stupid. Then I realized you're in my contacts because you're a friend, so I didn't even have to embarrass you that way. And I'm sorry I did, but I did.
No, I'm sorry that I put you through 5 seconds of thought over that. But that is, I think it's like, now I think it's funny. Like, I'm going to do that to people that I don't like because it's a mean thing. It was obviously an accident, but there's a lot of 8s and 4s in my phone number. Yes. All right. Moving on to something more important. How do you want to talk about Elon Musk's ownership of Twitter and his activity in it and what we've seen, frankly, over the past, we thought it was dying. A lot of people did a week ago or then a week after that or before that. But now he just ended a whole bunch of journalists because, Frank, I don't know. I'm not sure how you would say it. What are your thoughts about what's happening right now?
So let's talk about Twitter and then let's try to see if I can proselytize you into Mastodon.
Oh, you can, but you're going to have to help me get logged in.
We'll talk everybody through that. So Twitter is a fucking mess. We knew it would be. I'm disturbed by all the journalists who called it a hellscape before, and they didn't know what a hellscape was. And now they're all, they're going to miss it when it's gone. Even Maureen Joe today was talking about how wonderful it is with Mr. Geist. And it is wonderful. It has been wonderful. It's been great. But now it's awful. And Musk is insane. Just as insane, I think, as Trump and Kanye. And he's doing terrible things to it. And I fear that it is a goner. Now, I haven't left. I'm still there, as you are, because I think it's important to try to, it's like I didn't move to Canada when Trump became elected president. I thought about it. I talked about it, but I stayed. I'm not so egotistical to think that I can make any difference there. Maybe my ego really wants me to be banned by him, too, so I feel like I'm important.
Yeah.
But it's sad to see what's happening now. It's sad to see how people are leaving and the conversation is going away and the algorithm is throwing Musk and his right-wing yes boys into my feed constantly. Any halfway reliable, respectable advertiser is gone. And now he's loading it up with that. That stuff on a news site called Taboola and Outbrain that says, you won't believe what happened next, the clickbait headlines. So Those are the ads. Every 3 to 6 posts, he's desperately throwing in ads. I'm not going to pay $8 for nothing. So he's killing it. And I don't know why. I don't. People like Kara Swisher tried to imagine he had a plan to make it. I don't believe he has a plan. She was reading duck entrails to try to find one. I think it's completely a goner. It's offensive. It's awful. And I don't know that there's any hope. I think that it goes bankrupt and then the bankers and the Saudis come in and they take it over and they get somebody else to be in charge. Maybe it can be rescued then. Maybe it could be bought then because the value is just so low that somebody who takes it over, it's making Mark Zuckerberg look good these days. What if he took it over? What if somebody else did? I don't know what happens. But it's sad because so much happened there. And you think back, and it's problem I have with how people media view Twitter is that they always think that it's an amalgam. Twitter is mad today. Twitter is happy today. That's a mass media way to look at things. That's the way Musk is looking at it. But it's not. You got to see the trees for the forest. You got to see the individuals there and the communities there. And what got built up in Black Twitter and in Black Lives Matter and in Me Too and in Occupy Wall Street. And these movements are important. And I worry about what's going to happen to them now.
You're just talking, of course, about the American ones in China, in Iran, in Egypt, in Ukraine back in 2014. So it is a global disruption. And I love the way that you're talking about it as kind of the sadness of what we're lost. I mean, some people, I guess, are going to write books and epitaphs about this social media platform and what it brought or what it wrought, I suppose, the history of Twitter.
Yeah, I mean, and think of how many people you've met and how many people I've met.
I do. I'm so sad about it. Where will I find people?
And
where will they find me?
More than that is the community. What was that?
Where will they find me? Where does it leave independent creators who aren't big on a platform? So if you're big on YouTube, you're okay. If you're big on Instagram, and Facebook, I guess you're all right. But I mean, I was biggest on Twitter, I suppose, where I think that's where the people that I would want to find me to talk about life and politics and world events and all the things that I talk about here. So now where do people like me go? How do we get found? How do we tell people that we have a show, that we exist? We're independent.
So there's various alternatives emerging. The one that I'm less crazy about is called Post.News, started by Noam Barden. And full disclosure is that he came to me to be an advisor and set up an advisory board. And I wish him the best. Noam was the founder of Waze. He saves me hours every day. I love him. I respect him. He's trying to do good things with it. It's not wowing me. And I left the advisory board and received nothing, by the way, in the process.
Thank you for that transparency. I like Post. I only spent 5 seconds on it. Now I can't log into that one either. But go ahead. Tell me about it.
Well, that's that. So it's okay. It's kind of tries to be Twitter-like with just a constant feed. I think it's a mistake that it separates out the discussion from the posts. So you have comments on posts like newspaper sites have, which I think is a little weird. it's in his dream to try to monetarily support content with tips from the audience. I've seen a million efforts to bring micropayments to this. I'm not crazy about that. I wish him well, but it leaves me a little cold. Mastodon, on the other hand, I'm really liking. And if you go to my Medium page, jeffjarvis.medium.com, at the top of it is a post about joining Mastodon, which has all the details in it. So you don't have to take notes class, but we can talk about what it is.
Or interchangeably, as I prefer, you also videotaped the lecture, I guess, you were giving at school to your students about Mastodon.
So that's also on that page.
And,
so you can find that.
And so either way, and I shared that earlier on Twitter, if that's still alive. And so I am so happy that, A, you're touting it, and I learned a lot. I've only watched the first part of it of your talk, but A, that you're touting it, and B, that you're explaining it to us, because I was so frustrated this morning that I got locked out of my account, and now I'm worried that someone stole it or something because I got in earlier or something. I don't know. I can't get... Anyway, I'll figure that out on my own. Explain Mastodon, how it works, why you like it.
So Mastodon, the important thing to know right off the bat is nobody owns it. It is open source. It is federated. There are more than 7,000 instances, servers, all running Mastodon server, and they're all connected. This stops people right there. It confuses people because they say, well, how do I join? What do I join? There's a lot of places you can join. Mastodon.social, mstdn.social, newsy.social. There's various ones, and I'll list them in my post. I'm going to actually update the post. I'll list some of them in there. If you go to join Mastodon, it'll list a bunch of servers. It doesn't really matter. Right. Just join one.
That's the most important thing. People think if you join one, you'll be locked out. And you explain they're all connected, and it doesn't matter which one. So join whatever one, you'll have access. You
can connect to anybody on any place else. And here's the beauty of it. It's not just on Mastodon. That's all built on something called ActivityPub, which is just an open protocol, and other services are built upon it too. So there's something called PixelFed, which is basically Instagram without Zuck. And if you have a PixelFed account,
holy shit! What you just said, I'm going to play back for people. You just said a lot of words that I'm totally following you, but you're like servers and platforms and Instagram without Instagram without Zuck. That was one of the most thoughtful things if everybody knew what those words meant. But you're explaining. I shouldn't have interrupted. That sucked.
No, it's fine. So the server is called PixelFed, which is photos, and Mastodon has a whole bunch of places where you can come in and have conversation. There's a kind of an open source YouTube too, and there's other things as well. It's all connected, and wherever you choose to join, you can follow anybody anywhere, and that's pretty amazing. The next important thing to know is there's no algorithm. Unlike Facebook, unlike Twitter, there's no computer deciding what to put in front of you. Now, that's generally good because everybody blames the algorithms for polarizing the world. I don't think it's true, but fine. I actually miss the algorithm a little bit because sometimes the algorithm will point out things that I wake up and, Pete said something interesting at 11 o'clock last night and I missed it. Now, all you're going to see is just the people you follow as they say it. And then it goes away in the ether. So it's a little bit different to get your head around.
I can't go back and see something that you said last night.
You can search your own things. Yes. I can go to your account and see what you said last night. It's there. But in my standard feed,
well, I kind of prefer the way
chronological.
I kind of prefer the chronological, I think.
A lot of people do. So that's what you get. So you get a chronological feed, no algorithm. So far, no ads. Nobody can buy it. There can be no Musk in its future. Nobody can take it over. It is too amorphous. That's the important thing to know. Now, once you get in, there's a few minor differences. One is that the length of a post is 500 characters versus 280. So you can say a little bit more. Another is, and this is interesting, Eugen Rochko, who's the Russian-German who started this in 2016, a young guy, he thought that quote tweets brought bad behavior. And so that is to say, Pete posts something, I tweet it, and on top of it, I put a smart-ass remark. Why isn't this stupid what Pete says? Let's see what Pete says, right? So the belief is that creates bad behavior because Eugen, or Eugene, depending, believes that if you just respond to somebody, that's a conversation. But if I take your post and quote tweet it and say something about it, that's performative. That's me performing. That's me showing off. Look how snarky and clever I am at Pete's expense. So he said no quote tweets. Now he's softened on that stance and he may get it back. And in fact, Black Twitter, a lot of leaders and scholars of Black Twitter argue that the quote tweet is vital to the culture of Black Twitter for the culture of call and repeat. And it's not there now, but I think we'll kind of find some kind of voluntary structure in the future. The other interesting thing is there's no full text search because the founder also believed that meant you could go off and find people to troll. Who's talking about Taylor Lorenz? Let me go and get him.
There's no full
text search.
Full text.
You can search for names. You can search for hashtags. You can search for handles of people, but you can't search the text of the entirety of Mastodon. That's a little frustrating too, but I see the rationale behind it. Now, other than those things, it's pretty much Twitter-like. It's not Twitter. It shouldn't try to be Twitter, but it'll feel familiar to you. Here's the last thing to say. The hard part is you arrive there, I sign in, and I sit there and I say, boy, it's quiet. There's nobody here.
Right.
Because you got to follow people. Right, which is the same was the case with Twitter, the same is the case of Facebook. You need to find ways to follow people. Now, once we get Pete on, and Pete has a lot of smart friends and funny friends, you can go and see who Pete follows, and you can follow some of those folks. If you have a Twitter account, anybody who has put a Mastodon address in their Twitter account, there are services that let you find all those people and follow them. There's one called Movedon. Again, all this is in my post. You don't have to take notes class. And it will find those accounts. There are also lists. There's lists of journalists. There's lists of academics on Mastodon. You can go in and find those. And once you start following some people and follow who they follow and see who they boost, which is the same as a retweet, and follow more people, then you're going to find yourself in conversations. And I find the conversations to be better there. It's less performative. It's less smart-assed. There's cat photos still, but it's not overtaken by cat photos. I think it's a good place. And I like it. It doesn't mean we can replicate the magic that occurred at Twitter, especially around movements, I think, because it'll be harder. It's possible to get to a critical mass for something like Me Too, but harder without the algorithm.
I really appreciate that explanation, and everybody should definitely go check out both the Medium post and the video and join Mastodon. I'm in there, and I'll figure it out because I want to find joy where you have and connect with people. Oh boy, I've connected with so many people and so many with me, and it's just been wonderful for the most part. Obviously, I'm on there too much, usually looking at it rather than posting, but still. I've really loved it. I think it's going to somehow continue to be there as a source for people somehow because we won't be able to quit it. I don't know. I respect those who have, but that's my question. What does the Zuckerberg empire, Facebook, Instagram, and then there's obviously talk of banning TikTok altogether. I guess it's off government phones. I don't know. But what do the other platforms do? Will they make moves to take any of the Twitter audience to recreate what we had there? How did they respond to it? And should I be doubling down on one of the others?
Good question. I think that those two new Mastodon's not new, but it's newly discovered. And Post are trying to do that. I would imagine there are meetings at Facebook trying to figure out how to grab Twitter audience. The important thing here is that I think the internet went through a phase, and I could even argue it was a necessary phase, of corporate centralization. But we now see, oh Lord, do we see the danger of that? It means that one insane, venal, egotistical soul can take over one of these places that we depend upon and can do whatever he wants because it's private. You know, he can cut anybody else out he wants. He can erase my feed. He can choose what to have there. That's part of his free speech indeed. But we are vulnerable to that, and we can't do that again. And so I think my hope is that we're going to return to an original vision of the internet, which was open and distributed and run not from the center, but from the edges. And if that can happen, then a lot of new great things can be built upon top of that. Now, Jack Dorsey, who was the last sane CEO of Twitter, Before he left, he created something called Blue Sky, which is a lot like Mastodon and ActivityPub. It's an open protocol for discussion. And Jack said some months ago, as the whole Musk drama was occurring, that it was a mistake to make Twitter a company. And there's a belief that it should have been a protocol, not a platform. There's a really smart post by a guy named Mike Masnick. Have you ever had Mike on?
He started following me somewhere. I think
he's great. He's brilliant. He does tech dirt, and he really understands a lot of these issues. Mike wrote a post about protocols versus platforms. What this means is platform is a company. Protocol is like email or HTTP in the web. It is just a set of instructions people can agree about how something operates, and nobody can own it. You can build whatever you want on top of it, right? And so by making social a protocol, Jack's vision was that conversation, speech, content becomes a commodity. Anybody can say anything anywhere. And that's pretty much true now on the internet. Right? You can find some place to say whatever you want. If it's 8chan, if it's 4chan, if it's whatever. The opportunity then is to build things on top of that. That, let's say, I can build a service that finds the smart people about politics. And I can recommend them to you. And maybe I can support them. It's like the original way back when magazines. It's like the original Harper's. So, well, we got all this great stuff now. Everybody can print. Let's find the good stuff. Well, I think we've concentrated so much on trying to tamp down the bad stuff on the internet. If we instead look at creating services that find the good stuff, that discover it. And in this vision, you could maybe ESPN comes along and they create a recommendation service where they find everybody who's really smart about sports and all the fans and the good stuff, and you can get an ESPN view of the internet. Or you want a safe view that's got nothing bad in it, so you get the Disney view. Or you want the crazy view, and you can get the InfoWars view. Whatever, the choice will be yours. And you can get services, human run or algorithmic, that will find and discover and recommend stuff to you based on your desire, based on relevance to you, based on your taste, based on who you know. That's the vision for what could happen to social. Now, what that means is anybody can say anything. There'll be a lot of bad stuff, but there is already. It's already out there. If you go walking through Times Square, there's idiots. They're saying stupid things. They're saying wrong things. You just ignore them. We've got to look at the internet the same way. Ignore the bad shit and find the good shit. And I'm an optimist to a fault, but I think we've got to rebuild the internet that we have to date and go back to those roots with the lessons we've learned to try to rebuild it around the opportunity for you to have the power to select the internet you want to see.
I like your vision. I like your dream. I have a hard time wrapping my head around what it's going to look like, because it seems like there is that vision seems like it requires a certain amount of good faith and where there's profit to be made. I mean, Twitter, is a gold mine for the right people, and it's been also a source of revenue and income for so many other people. I mean, if you're big on Twitter, if you're huge on Instagram or TikTok, and that's where the majority of your business comes from, and it just goes away, what does that mean for those people? That's tough. It's especially tough for those of us who don't love that element of it, that, marketing everything that you're doing. Like my favorite part of my job is I'm talking to Jeff Jarvis. I'm getting to ask you the questions that I want to know the answers to and then sharing those conversations. But man, it's going to mean a lot for a lot of people. I don't know how to predict what it's going to mean in this case.
Well, as you talk, what makes me think of is that if one tries to follow the money on the internet, one goes down too many different paths. So to date, the old mass media model was imported into the internet, where you had to get a large audience's attention to slap ads in front of their eyeballs, right? And so that dictated so much of how the internet operated. Whereas at the same time, you have creators, you being a creator, who say, I'm making neat stuff. I'm connecting with people in neat ways. I think I'm delivering some value. Some people are choosing to support me. How does that operate? And there were different paths for creating value. So the question is it possible to imagine an internet that is focused more on the creator than the advertiser. One thing I think you found in doing, how many years now you've been doing this?
The independent thing or overall?
Yeah, the independent thing.
3 years since 2019. Yeah,
which is amazing. He's still eating. He still looks like he can, put food on the table doing this. Right? It's hard. It's not easy. It's nerve wracking. But you're doing it. You've done it. Right?
Yeah, but and now that in my case and probably a lot of other people's case, my shows. I don't know what you're about to say, but my show's in a good place, and I'm running it. I'm good at making the whole thing happen every day and every week, and I'm really happy with the product. But you have to continue to tell people that you exist. And one of the best things for me, of course, was Jeff Jarvis comes on and he tells people this guy, Pete Dominick, exists. So I'm sure I'll be able to continue to do that with guests and be able to promote, wherever they are, they'll promote this. But more importantly, just the idea of continuously telling people, hey, I do a thing and it's over here.
Right. And there'll be places to do that. I think the key is the definition of critical mass isn't mass.
Right. I agree with that.
You don't need, it'd be lovely if you had it, but you don't need an audience of 10 million.
I need 3,000 subscribers, and I would be really comfortable. I've got 740 some or 30 some, whatever it is. And it's hard to, keep adding to that, much less, keeping people for, long, I've done well and people have been awesome to me, but still you got to keep that going. It's tough. Yeah. So I see what you're saying.
You got to keep them too once you have them.
Yes. But you don't, but your point is you don't need 1 million. You need, and my point is, no, you need 3,000. You'd be pretty good. If you had 5,000, you have 30,000, you have a yacht. But I mean,
Right. So if you can find another 1,000 people on Mastodon and the problem is you're going to be split different ways, and some on TikTok.
Yeah.
And some on Instagram, and some on Facebook.
Oh, the amount of work that it goes into to piecemeal all your posts up that what you had over here. It's a daunting idea.
Yeah, it is. I agree. But the problem is we had that presumption of mass media that the only thing that mattered were things that were huge.
Right.
You need big enough.
Exactly.
And I think big enough is possible. And I hope, I don't know, we'll see. I just don't know yet. That on Mastodon, one can build slightly deeper relationships than one had on Twitter. Again, the limitation is if you write something brilliant at 10 at night, if I'm not there to see it,
right,
somebody else has to find it and boost it in the morning for me to discover it. That's a weakness, right? But I think it can be doable. Now, Twitter's not going to necessarily completely die. It'll still be there. It's just going to be yucky.
Covered in porn.
It probably.
Speaking of which, Donald Trump, done? He's gone full. Your friends at Morning Joe made a hilarious video intersplicing all of the classic TV sales guys, Crazy Eddie and the sealant guy,
and QVC,
all of them, and they put this crazy carnival music behind it, and it was absolutely perfect. And I just wonder, is this it for him? Is he over? Is he just an old senile man living in a weird castle?
How many times was he declared over? How many times was
you're one of those guys? You're one of those guys.
Yeah, and I watch Morning Joe for good and ill, and Joe is constantly saying, the Republicans, what are you going to finally learn? Well, I tweeted this morning, just let them not learn.
Yeah, I saw that.
Let them go, Joe. Let them go. You're not one of them anymore. Stop.
Yeah.
He's already demonstrated how completely insane he is, how malign and evil and awful he is, and certain people are going to stick with him no matter what. There's not a lot we can do with that. But this goes back to my point before about paying too much attention to the bad shit and not enough to the good shit.
Yeah.
Right. So media are covering him and covering the Republican Party, which is a minority in this country. They're not covering the majority in this country. They're not covering Biden's accomplishments enough. And that's what we need to concentrate on. But the narrative isn't that. The narrative is, what about Trump? What about Trump? What about the Republicans? He's completely nuts. He's completely stupid. He's insane. He's senile. He's mentally disturbed. We know all that. But he has no pride. That's the paradox of Trump. He's nothing but pride, but he has no pride. He will pump himself up with anything. So he can stand there and do that stupid NFT thing and think that it's wonderful because he has no pride, because he thinks that everything he does is prideful.
That's well said. But I also think the other thing he doesn't have, this is my theory, is money. I mean, I think either he's protecting money over here and he's trying to make it over there, but like, where is he making money? His name was the whole thing forever. And he's done nothing but sully his name, and he's not making. And now he keeps coming out with, if he's got to come out with a new product, which is just a digital image of him, and that's what he's literally selling pictures of himself, and he's like doing Cameo, basically. I mean, maybe he's out of money. I don't know.
Maybe he might be. I mean, he has raised a tremendous amount from all of. I mean, I'm sure somebody subscribed you to his emails, like somebody subscribed me.
Yeah. He's fleeced.
So I get all those.
Yeah,
right?
sure.
So he fleeces people, and he's raised a lot of money, which is not really going to campaigns, which is going in his pocket. So he's got enough to live on. His golf courses have lost money. We don't know his real finances. The tax returns are going to come in way too late to tell us anything. Who knows? It's so unbelievably laughable, but people still believe in him. Well, let me ask you this question. Put it this way. If you had your choice today, who do you want to be the Republican nominee for president?
Donald Trump.
Right.
But I mean, for having to hear from him, his face hole, or talk about him as, the nominee, all the bad things about that would come with him, I would think he'd be the easiest to beat. I mean, I still think it's always bears worth repeating that the election of 2016 was a black swan event, right?
I hope.
I mean, had you run that election 800 more times, it most likely wouldn't have come out that way. Is in the simulated world.
Yeah, in a world where Hillary Clinton won, but both houses were against her and impeached her 47 times, one wonders whether that would have been better.
Well, yeah, in a number of circumstances that could change. But anyway, so that's what I would think. But have you seen my prediction? And I boldly, there's a bit I do that most people don't get, which is a shame, but it's that I'm always wrong. So I boldly make predictions sometimes. So I said at the last World Cup game, the semifinals, that I predicted, and I only did this because the expert did, and then I did. Clint Dempsey said that Croatia would win 2-0, and so I went on, and I was like, all right, I'll go with that. So I said I predict Croatia will win 2-0, and 3 minutes into the game, Argentina scored a goal, and it ended up being 3-0. I think Argentina. The point is, I'm always wrong. That's the bit, but I'll still tell you what I think is possible. I think Mike Pompeo will be the nominee.
Yeah. And what happens then? What happens if well, go ahead. Just play that out.
He definitely brings the Christ back. Christ returns under his watch. He nukes something. He's crazy. I don't know. No, he's probably pragmatic. I don't know. I don't know what happens then. I can't predict what happens then. I'm going as far as saying that it's not
Trump.
Trump.
Like President Cheney. Old Cheney.
Oh, he could run.
Similar.
He could run.
No, I think Pompeo would be like him.
Oh, yeah, he'd be a warmonger and for sure. But no, his whole thing is his Christianity. That's what I'm most worried about. His white
air quotes, please, for those who are just listening to us. Let's put air quotes around the word Christianity there.
All right. Well, talking about the things that are good, then, that's what you said we should be doing. We should be focused on. So what are they? What should we be focused on? What are the issues or news stories or technological advancements? I have a listener who's in my ear about open AI and how that's going to transform everything in a way that hasn't happened since the internet. And Moore's Law is out the door and we are on our way. And
let's talk about that.
I
find that fascinating.
I can't talk about it. You can't. I'm doing research now and reading about what people are saying, but what are your thoughts on the next, big disruptor?
Have you played with GPT chat yet?
I tried to get in there and get on there for a few minutes, and then I punked out because it was too long of a process.
Right, but it's worth playing with. I think it'd be fun to do it. I was going to do this at a panel. We could do a talk show where it's you and GPT chat.
Oh, really?
You could do that.
Okay,
it's that believable. The important thing, so what we're talking about here is that AI has gotten so good. You've all seen these images that come across because you train it with millions upon millions of images, and then it can create amazing pictures. Of course, the latest version looks like it's the dreams of a horny 15-year-old boy, because it's a lot of women with big breasts in their imaginations, but it can be adjusted. Then on the textual side, there were things that would work, but GPT chat has reached another level where you tell it, I asked it to give me instructions about how to fold a t-shirt in the style of Malcolm Gladwell. And it was hilarious, and it was right. It was him finding bigger lessons.
I mean, this guy, my friend DJ, called me up and said, I told it to write a sonnet, and I gave it 3 inputs, like pizza, gold, and hair. And it wrote a sonnet, including those words. And he also just made the point that it's going to replace people because you don't need certain people to do the coding or some of the lower level writing.
Right. It can also do coding. It can do lots of things. It can write songs. Now, what I've seen is fascinating is that teachers are going crazy. We can never assign essays anymore. We won't know whether it came from the student's brain or from...
Right. He said he had that same concern. Yeah. Go ahead.
But I think it's a little bit different from that. I think that over some centuries, since Montaigne and his essays, the price of entry into the public discourse was being able to write, be articulate, to be literate. And a lot of people were left out of the public conversation as a result. Now, snobs may say all the better, but I think we didn't hear from a lot of people. And what GPT chat allows you to do is to get help. I see people who are writers who say, I'm blocked. Let me get a start. I'll brainstorm with it. I'll put in some things and get it to say something. So it gets me to think about, oh, well, that's not very good, but now I know what I want to do. It helps you express yourself. And that's pretty amazing that when you add up, new alphabets and emojis and memes and short video and GPT chat, people can enter into the public conversation in ways that were scary to them when it came to writing. I'm sure we both know a lot of people who get scared of writing an email, writing a letter, writing an essay, writing any of this stuff, a blog post. Is frightening to people. That's why
I don't write.
Well, I don't.
That's why I don't write.
You do write because you write comedy.
Well, no, but I don't write things that require commas and the correct usage then and then. And I'm terrified at looking like an idiot.
Right. And so...
I am when it comes to writing.
But even GPT chat actually understands the structure of comedy. That's why you should really play with that. It's like Seinfeld is all about the architecture of a joke.
Well, then it's got something on me.
But so what it means is that content, speech, is fully commoditized. There's a never-ending abundance of content. And those of us who thought that we were special in the world because we wrote content aren't special anymore.
Right.
There's no end of content.
Yeah, but
so what's special is relationships and other things.
Yeah, but you're using the word special, and I'm talking about people's livelihoods.
Well, yeah. But we could put value and find value elsewhere. You want to write one thing that's very good at.
You're so dismissive of so many people.
Well, including journalists, right? I mean,
there's a lot of jobs that are in, that world that'll be maybe replaced by artificial intelligence.
There's been automated content creation for some years now with very structured data,
right?
With sports stories and finance stories. Now, I remember being in a newsroom when I was on an advisory board where we were talking about this with sports. And we turned around to this young guy who was the sports editor. And we said, does this scare you? He said, no. He said, I don't want to write boring high school game stories. I want to go off and do better stories. This takes the drudge work away from me so I can get all that crap done. And the kids' names are in the newspaper and it's fine. And then I can do more interesting things.
I like that take.
Here's the issue with it, though, is that all machine learning does is predict the next word based on the millions and millions of examples it has. It says the next word is going to be best if it's this, and it tests against all kinds of words and says, okay, I picked the best word next, and then the next one, and then the next one, and the next one. And it does that impressively. It doesn't deal with facts well. Doesn't mean it couldn't, but right now it doesn't. So if you ask it a question, it may give you a right answer. It may give you a wrong answer. But whichever answer it gives you is going to sound credible. So there's going to be a lot of truth gnashing about more sources for disinformation and misinformation, more sources for wrong things. The age of facts are over. No, you just have to understand what you're looking at. The other thing about it is that it's built on the world that we have now, the internet we have now. So it comes with all the biases that are built in there.
Right.
So women are disadvantaged. People of color are disadvantaged. You ask for a doctor, it's going to give you a picture of a white person. You ask for a nurse, it's going to give you a picture of a white nurse. You ask for an athlete, it's going to give you, and so on and so forth, right? So we've got to recognize that what it gives us is a reflection of our current human reality. Now we can change that. We can adjust that. We can demand that it do differently, and we should do that. But it's not an oracle from on high giving us truth. It's just something that parrots back to us, called a stochastic parrot. And it gives us back our own mirror in a new way. And that makes it fascinating. It doesn't necessarily replace us. It can brainstorm with us. It can take away drudgery like writing manuals and documentation. It can help people express themselves better.
Can it hold me at night?
Yeah.
It can hold me at night?
Yeah.
The other night I said to my smart device, which I have an Echo, so I call it Echo. I said, Echo, set an alarm for 4 a.m. She said, alarm is set for 4 a.m. And then I, not jokingly, and I know I had to tell somebody this out loud, so I'll just tell you and record it and share it. I said, good night. And then it didn't say anything. And then I said, Echo, good night. And then it said, have a good night or whatever. But I really did for a minute. I was like talked back to it for real. I was like, good night. Oh dear, I'm alone.
Now, a truly smart device would have said, 4 a.m. Are you nuts? Why?
I had to get up early and put that morning's. Usually I get the podcast done at night and post it, but I had to get up early. I was out doing something last week, so didn't do it. But yeah, it would judge me is what you're asking it to do.
Yes.
Well, that's not far off. Machine. That's not far off. Okay, sir. Well,
this is a geek episode, man. I'm sorry.
I needed this. Geek on you. We needed it. I think we really needed it. There's a lot happening. There's a lot of change and disruption happening, and people are real anxious about it. Clearly, as I wanted to be as transparently anxious as I could be on this podcast, and now I want to go talk with you about tech help. Thank you, Jeff Jarvis.
Call yourself a teenager.
As always, I really appreciate it.
Always a pleasure.
All right, there he is, Jeff Jarvis, everybody. Check him out on Mastodon and on Post, and, of course, still there on Twitter. And he helped me out after we got done, by the way, and got me back into my Mastodon account, no problem. I was signing into the wrong website. I get so confused with these new things, as I've already mentioned. He is at Jeff Jarvis at mastodon.social, everybody. Always great to talk to him. And, of course, Dr. R. Caplan as well. Great discussions on today's show. Thank you so much for listening to it. If you listen to all 1 hour and almost 23 minutes here, I am so appreciative. If you've not written a review, please do. If you've not signed up for a paid subscription, that'd be amazing. And if you've never emailed me, hey, come on and introduce yourself. standupwithpete@gmail.com. Tomorrow I'll have a great conversation with another PhD. This is Dr. Christina Greer. Chrissy Greer joins me tomorrow for a great conversation. And who else we will see. But that's all I've got for you today. Thank you for listening. I'll talk to you tomorrow. I love you. Bye-bye.
The devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is a lie. Don't get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. And even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up. Can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up. Stand up. a land for all. They had to stand up. They had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up. We got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up. You got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well, and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up. Stand up. Got to stand